Hey, we're back and ready to do some engine disassembly. Took the belt off while we're looking at it. Thermoid V96. Surprisingly, this belt is in amazing shape. It's very flexible and no cracks, so I don't know if that was recently put on there, but might be able to use that. If we take a walk around the engine and start, the goal is to check it out functionally, and then also we want to put some paint on this and make it look really nice. So we'll have to take some things off here as we make it the block easier to get to. Have to do a rebuild on the carburetor. We can clean all of this stuff off, but we've got to take these components off to clean this up. Just to walk around. Was doing some research, found some high temperature paints that might work well for this. So on the exhaust manifold, probably some kind of a rubber piece in here that's probably dry rotted in the fuel pump, so we'll get that off also and just start getting things off. I want to drain the oil next in the pan just to make sure, and that way we can see what the oil looks like in there. I grabbed 3 wrenches, of course, inch and a quarter, inch and a 1/16, and the one I didn't grab, inch and an 1/8. That's what it is. That's the way it always works. And we're gonna see if we can see what this oil looks like in here. Chance there might not be any from shipping, but we'll see. Nope, there's some oil. Not horrible looking. Good thing there's like no water or anything in there, so it's good news. So to get this engine ready for paint and check things out, I gotta start taking parts off. Got my little miner's hat. I like this flashlight, pretty cool. Puts a lot of light in the area you're interested in focusing on. And you can see I've noticed on this engine a lot of the bolts aren't that tight. I don't know if they just didn't have high torque specs, or it's pretty easy to work on so far. So I'll get that fan off. So the fan and pulley came off fairly easy. As I get ready to assemble stuff back on, I'll clean all these up and put black paint back on these. I'll make sure I keep the hardware with it. So what I'd like to do is get this pulley off. One thing I noticed, I rotated this. The engine does, rotate. Here's the timing mark, and I just barely see these, but you can see those marks there. So I've lined it up center there for now, and to hold that in place, I think I'll be able to put a bar across the non-thread areas of there to keep the engine from rotating while I'm trying to take this pulley off the front. We got a piece of square iron in there. You can see the bolts have, there's 2 different styles. There's straight through bolts that have nuts that go on the other side. And then there's that big one's got a big taper that's available. So I put it against that to keep the engine from rotating. And the bolt did break loose pretty easy, but I did notice that the lock washer that was in there just broke in half as I loosened it. It wasn't overly tight or anything, came loose pretty easy. Okay, it's just some little tapping from the back side. Notice it's got a rubber piece here that sandwiches between it. This plate just sits on the top there that bolt went to. And you know, we had the timing mark here, and of course, you know, the engineers think ahead. People put things together wrong, and you'll notice the hole pattern is close over here and wide over here. So there's no way to put this on wrong. That's the way it belongs. You know, we had the line with the timing mark there, but if you try to rotate this, you can't get it to go on any other way. Those holes kind of lined up there, but they're not centered, of course. So even though you can like kind of get it close, it just won't bolt together until you get it in the right spot, and then of course that lines back up where we left it. So that's nice. Okay, and then to get this last pulley off, I got a gear puller. Notice it's keyed, so there's only one way to put that on. Then I just make sure that the end of this hits in that taper in there. It's not going to damage any thread, so should be able to pull on that. Okay. Yeah, my pulley, gear puller, you know, if I put the teeth out like this, you can see I'm going to run out of thread before I can get down in there to pull that. But that's why they put two sets of holes here. So I'll take these bolts out, move them up there, and that'll give me a shorter pull and should be able to get it. Okay, got the puller pattern adjusted, put the bolts up closer. One thing I like to do is look from the end and make sure it's somewhat equal space between the threaded part and the puller. Make sure the teeth are engaged well before I start cranking on it. Okay, preparing to take a distributor coil off. One thing that's interesting, you can see on the coil, you have a plus and a minus, and you notice the plus side goes over to the coil, which that's telling us this is a positive ground system. And that was pretty typical before 1954, and this is a 54 Kaiser Darrin, so this was a 6-volt positive ground system. The other interesting thing I saw here is this looks like an oiler cap of some type, but yeah, not sure why there's no cap on here, which makes me think the oil would just run through and out the other side, so might need to find a cap for that. While I was taking the coil off, one side, the WD-40 made this one nice and loose. This one, however, took and pulled the threads out the other way. So I'll see if I can clean that up and make this work the way it's supposed to. So here's my trick to clean that bolt. Locked another 1/4 20 nut on there, and then I can use that pressure to help back this one out. Get this out of the way here. Put some WD-40 on there, and I'm just going to work it back and forth like that until we get it cleaned up. Got it nice and cleaned up, works the way it's supposed to now, so I can take these other nuts off and go put that stud back in there. Okay, got the cleaned up one out here, turning it back in, and I'll use the same trick. I'll use the nut from over on this side over here now to double nut that. Give us a little bit of a locking thread on there, and then we can use this guy to tighten that on. There we go. Okay, I took the distributor bolt out here and just giving a little bit of tap just to let it help it come out. And you can see it's got an offset key on it. So same good design where you can't put it in wrong. It'll only go in one way. Okay, we pretty well got this side of the engine cleared off. Now we'll start working on this other side. Got a fuel line here, or I'm sorry, an oil line that's got to come off. Exhaust manifold. We're gonna leave that guy on. Not even sure what that is. I'd have to check into that. And then the fuel pump. And looks like another oil line. This is the one that went up to the oil filter. I'm trying to get the oil line off of the back side of the engine here. And one thing I noticed with some of these oil lines, you start to loosen it, but you can see the pipe also, the tube wants to go with it. And you can twist these tubes. So I put some WD-40 squirt down the top. And what I've found with these is if you kind of work them back and forth a little bit and let that WD-40 work its way down in that tube, then it tends to not want to grab the tube and twist it or tear it up, and then it starts to come out a lot easier like that. A similar setup on the back oil line, similar to the front. They have connections here and here, but then they use one of the exhaust manifold bolts. Well, I'll have to get a wrench to get that one off. I've noticed these aren't too tight. They're not so hard to get off. I think part of the reason these are not so tight is they are using like a brass nut on the steel stud, so I think that just keeps the corrosion down and comes off pretty easy. So there's 8 nuts to hold this exhaust manifold on, and 2 of the nuts were used to also hold the oil lines on the end, and those brackets that were with those oils acted as a flat washer. The rest of these other 6 studs had flat washers on them. Okay, trying to persuade the exhaust manifold to come off. I notice there's, gasket and a little bit of space on these square tabs. I'm just going to tap lightly there. Yep, and it started to make the whole system separate. So now we've got some separation. We'll take a look at these exhaust gaskets then. Got my hands free so I can pull this off now. And those came off pretty well. This one on the end definitely destroyed, but now we can see, well, that's interesting. You can see this exhaust gasket doesn't match the hole very well. So we'll see what caused that. Somebody might have, maybe these are positional or something. We'll see if we can adjust that when we reinstall. Okay, I'm gonna get this gasket off. When I said positional, I just meant probably matters which way you install. So we'll get this gasket off and see if we flip it around, if it makes the holes line up better. That's my suspicion, which is interesting. Whoever put this on definitely restricted the flow, so we're just going to rotate it like this, and even though you see a little space here at the bottom, it does match up on the top. So yeah, somebody had put this gasket in upside down. So bonus for me, I'm going to get a few extra horsepower now when I drive it compared to them. So getting ready to take the carburetor off. This nut here is a real challenge. One thing I noticed though is if I would adjust on that adapter plate, you can see the shiny spot. It's right there where my finger is. A little shiny spot right there. That's where the socket was dragging. It's like, oh man, if there was just a couple thousandths less material there, the socket would drop straight down onto it. So maybe during assembly process, I'll take just a little off the side of this. There's plenty of extra material there, and see if that makes that easier to install. Okay, get a couple more items off. We'll get this water pipe off. It went probably to the heater system in the car. And then this is the accelerator linkage that went over to the carburetor that was sitting over here. So we get the water pipe off, then we can get this linkage off, get that water pipe off, and then I think we're ready to take the main head off, intake there. Okay, getting ready to take the valve cover off. It has some acorn nuts, and then it has some like rubber seals that go there. Those are looking really rough, so those will have to get replaced so things don't leak. But now we can, and I don't think this had a gasket, so somebody was playing with this chrome part. So now we get to take the first look. Yeah, super new in there, so I think this is a new chrome part that was just placed on there for looks. Yeah, the gasket is definitely old and broken in places and needs replaced. Okay, next thing I'll do is I'll take the engine hoist brackets off and then take these two bolts out so I can get the accelerator mechanism off there. And then I'll pull the spark plugs, and I think we've got everything off the engine for now. Got the spark plugs out. Some nice AC 45 plugs. They got the copper gaskets, and they all look similar. Not horrible, just, you know, they're dirty. Some of them are a little cleaner than others, but not too bad. Looking at the rods now, you can see the ones that are down all the way are they don't have tension because the springs are all the way up, and you can see they spin freely. Tiny bit of play there, which there's probably a standard gap for that. These two were all the way down. The rest of them are under compression, can't spin. Just taking a look on the exhaust side, and you can probably see what I see. There's a little bit of surface rust up in there. So probably going to be good to take that head off and make sure we don't have rusting or pitting on the other side of this, since we can see that rust there. Okay, next order of business to be able to get this head off is take the rocker assembly off. And there's these nuts down through here that hold this whole assembly on. You can see when you take this nut off, it'll let this whole rod and everything lift up off of these, and so this will lift up and these will lift up. Okay, we got those nuts off, and the rocker assembly just slid right up. And now you'll see there's intake versus exhaust, and these rods are just setting in there. Trying to see if there's any difference between them. Doesn't seem to be any different markings on them, so they look like they're all the same. That one's interesting. See why that one has some rust or water buildup on it, so it could be see if anything's causing that. Okay, we got all the head bolts out. A little bit of a leverage point down here. See if I can get the head to loosen up. Yep, looks like it has. Yep, head came right off. Okay, let's take a little bit closer look. I'll get the shop vac and start cleaning some of this up, but we can see there's quite a bit of things blocking some passageways maybe, or just dirt. Maybe those don't matter, but this one worries me a little bit. Maybe that's just falling out of the head from me moving it around. The water passages in there. Quick look in the cylinders, look pretty good though. Yeah, those look pretty nice, and I don't see any big problems on the pistons, so might not be too bad. When we look at these valve seats though, yeah, definitely gonna have to get some things cleaned up. I mean, those are not gonna seal very good with that. You can see how that one's sticking up there. And then the exhaust valves are actuated down in here, so we can take these covers off to look down inside there, and that's where we can take a look at that. But no matter what, we're gonna have to take this to a shop, and not sure you guys can see that, but where that valve seats, that should be nice, shiny, smooth metal. It's really rusted there, so we gotta at least get it to a shop to get that. And over on the intake side, that was kind of blocked off, so some of these water passages were blocked off. I had opened them up a little bit, but like you can see down at this one right here, it's kind of blocked off. It's gonna need to be cleaned out. And if we look closely, you can see these probably have some surface rust on them also. Sorry about that. So these will have to be taken to the shop. And this is wet here, or looks wet, oily. So that one's a little different than the others. But no matter what, we'll go get the valves cleaned up on the intake and exhaust side. Okay, so we've got the panels off the side of the engine, and this was that one rod that looked strange when we pulled it out. It was in this hole here, and we notice where we see this, there's a lot of corrosion there, and in that corrosion is definitely, it's dropped down into this part of the engine. The rest of them look to have oil and pretty good, and this one here, I'm not sure if it was getting lubrication or if it was just this one area that was just rotting and flaking off. So this rod's gonna probably have to be replaced. It looks like that's pretty thin there. You can actually see it's thinner and pitted pretty good there. It's gonna be a weak spot. Okay, one more thing today, and then I think we'll stop. We're gonna pull this pan off, take a look in there, see what that looks like. Did make contact with a local machine shop that has experience with these F-head style engines, and they can clean these valves. They can clean these valves up for us, and so I'll take the block and the head over to them tomorrow, and they'll have it for a week or so, and then I'll hopefully be able to start painting it after that. Okay, this is the floating oil pan that we're the pickup. It floats kind of down in there. Took that off, and if we look at the bottom of this, not too bad. There's a little bit of sludge down in there, so clean that up. See what this thing is. That looks interesting. So, no, it looks like some kind of a gasket material or something. So, it breaks up. So, maybe just particles left over. Okay, got the looking real close in this oil pan. Got it out and cleaned up real nice inside, but we see right there, hopefully you can see there's a hole in there. I got a light on the other side. So yeah, that hole I'll have to weld up. It looks like there's some weird spot in the metal in here, so get to practice my welding skills for that. Now that I've got this pan cleaned out, I got it up to the sunlight, you can really see that hole there. It's going to take some welding, and I think that also explains some of that junk that was down the bottom. There was a tremendous amount of adhesive around this gasket surface that I had to get off, and I think somebody was trying to seal an oil leak that was actually due to a hole in the pan with some gasket sealer. Okay, I've put the bolt back on here with some spacers just so I can turn the engine and look at the cylinders. I put little drops of oil down in those cylinders, and they look really good. I was really happy with what I'm seeing there with those. So, not sure, it's a little blurry. See if I can get you guys a better look at it. There you can kind of see they look like mirrors down in there. So I'm really happy with the cylinders. When I come around this side and look, I smeared a little bit of oil and grease, or oil up in there, so just a tiny bit of rust at the top edge, which won't matter. That's what's making some of that brown look there, but really smooth up in there, so that's good. So I got the gaskets all cleaned off. I notice each time I turn the motor upside down, get quite a bit of rust that falls out from the water system there. So I'm gonna blow that out and vacuum it up, and then I think it's ready to go to the machine shop.